So I am going to begin. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the presentation and webinar for the FABrIC Open Call. Overview presentation. My name is Richard Dunda, and I am a solutions advisor for the FABrIC program. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping up at the beginning. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. All right, we'll get those at the end of the presentation. All right, if you can't hear me or there's something that you need to have restated, then please put that in the chat instead of the Q&A, and either I will see it or Brett will let me know, and I'll readdress what wasn't heard or what wasn't understood. Again, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. We'll get to it at the end. All right. For today, we've got a lot to cover. So at the beginning, we'll talk about FABrIC, what the opportunity is, and how it's powered by CMC. Some information about this particular call, and its two pieces, which are both process development or fabrication, and product development, which is IoT or semiconductor chips. Information about who can apply, a program we call challenge support, project selection criteria, and then how to apply. All right, so what is FABrIC? FABrIC is an ISED-funded strategic resource fund, SRF, right? That is a 5-year project, started about 2.5 years ago. We have about 27 months left in a funding period. Right. The total value of the project is $217 million, which includes contributions from the grant recipients, and a direct funding amount of $120 million from ISED, which is roughly divided into 3 big buckets: grant dollars, right? The quantum, 4 big buckets: the grant dollars, the quantum readiness program, something we call the innovation platform, and operational support for the program. The objective of FABrIC is to accelerate made in Canada semiconductor and IoT products and fabrication process development through our challenge funding. It leverages Canada's existing strength in product development, photonics, MEMS, compound semiconductors, and quantum. Another project goal is or program goal is to cultivate and educate the HQP, or highly qualified professional pipeline, drive quantum readiness in the country, and build the ecosystem through intensive connections and giving the opportunity for networking and to people to meet each other. All right, the overarching objectives for FABrIC: design and development and production of new advanced semiconductor projects, sensors and semiconductors. That is the IoT product stream. Right? These are Canadian-based companies developing and commercialize chips and sensors in Canada, targeting growing the semiconductor market. It doesn't mean sales are limited to Canada. You're encouraged, of course, to sell internationally, but design and development have to happen here. Creation of intellectual property, and likewise with the IoT product, creation of fabrication processes for the fabs that are in Canada or that are contracted by our IoT creators or our fabrication creators. The whole goal of this is a national security and resiliency objective to increase the supply chain or improve the supply chain of critical semiconductor products and technologies while leveraging Canada's strength in this space. All right, FABrIC is again a program that sits on top of a company called CMC Microsystems. For those who don't know CMC, it's been around for more than 40 years, right? And is a leader in the Canadian semiconductor industry. They provide strategic management, training, services like advanced infrastructure design and support, fab support services, pipeline or talent pipeline development, design and support services, and some ecosystem work to make sure there's a robust network of national and international collaborators. right? And you see Gord Harling there, who's the president and CEO of CMC. Okay, now about the FABrIC call. One challenge call, 2 tracks. Just some detail, 2 tracks is one for IoT and product development and one for fabrication and process development. The application portal opened on August the 10th, and it remains open as is relevant in terms of when applications are relevant, and I'll come back to that in a second, relevant as it relates to time for the duration of the FABrIC program. EOIs on the portal are reviewed based on when they can be assessed, and there's 2 more assessment cycles, one called round 3 and one called round 4, and I'll provide some more details on that so you understand in a couple of slides. But EOIs are accepted on a consistent basis. Again, as I said, expressions of interest are always open, but they're reviewed in 2 cycles. So the round 3 EOIs are due on September the 8th. Round 4 EOIs are due December the 1st. So what really drives that is when you want your project assessed and when the project can finish by. So for EOIs that are, and there's a full timeline later on, for EOIs that are submitted by September the 8th, if you want to go in round 3, then the project needs to end by October 31st, 2028. If you want to go, so that's the round 3 assessment cycle. If you want to get pushed to round 4, or your project's going to end later by December 18th, 2028, then you can have your project assessed in the round 4 timeline. In terms of round 3, EOIs are due September the 8th. The full applications are due by October 26th, and you'll get the invite. If your EOI is passed, then you'll get the invite to the full application sometime in the second week, before the end of the second week of September. And as I mentioned, round 3 projects need to end by October 31st, 2028. If you're opting to wait for round 4, the round 4 assessment cycle, then full applications are due by February 9th, 2027, and those projects need to end by December 18th. Right, and you'll notice that round 4 is a couple of months shorter in terms of project duration, right, than round 3. Okay. All right, so when you say 2 tracks, what do we mean? One is fabrication process development. So those are semiconductor fabrication processes, capabilities, and capacities developed through Canadian-based fab facilities. So that process needs to land or be supported by a Canadian fab. Fabrication process development projects are reimbursed up to 40% of eligible project expenses, right? In a fabrication process development, a multinational can be a lead or a co-lead with a couple of conditions, right? And the exit needs to be at TRLL 7 or higher. For the MNE to be eligible, that basically they need to be a wholly owned and operating Canadian subsidiary. So the revenue needs to be recognized in Canada, the company's incorporated in Canada, right? And there's less than 500 people, right? So eligible, but with conditions. In the IoT product development space, I want to emphasize that those are semiconductor chips or sensor devices. They are not the amalgamation of existing chips into an IoT system. Right? So we're not just funding software that aggregates chips together. Right? Commercialization has to happen in Canada, meaning the plan and the development of the team that does that is here, but commercialization is expected to be at least North American, if not international. The reimbursement rate on IoT projects is slightly lower, 37% of eligible project expenses, and in this case, M&Es are not eligible, only as collaborators. You need to be a SME, small and medium enterprise. And the exit on these is TR level 8 or higher. Right? So both of these are commercialization programs, not research programs. Curry, if you have questions around this, please put them in the Q&A. Funding. Funding is up to $1 million in non-repayable grant funding. There's a little bit of an exception to that we may consider grants of up to 1.5 million. Right? As long as you don't exceed the eligible project reimbursement rate for projects that are large scale, and need that quality of funding. Funding is non-repayable. This is a grant. The way funding works in this program is that it is a reimbursement program. So you're filing claims in this program quarterly. So in the end of one quarterly claim period, we are reimbursing you based on payments during that period, not the accrual of expenses. Right? And in order to file the claim, you need to have proof of payment. The program does not support capital equipment purchases. Right? Leases of some equipment can be supported, but those are operating costs. Again, there is possibility of $1 million in funding, and repeat applicants are allowed. Right? We are already completed 2 full rounds of FABrIC, and there are already repeat applicants. In terms of eligibility and strategic alignment, there needs to be a clear path to commercialization and evidence of market pull. You need to align to the FABrIC strategic objectives, which are in the Challenge Program Guide if you don't know them. You need to leverage Canadian fabrication facilities where possible. And at the end, for FAB, the TRL needs to be greater than 7 or 8 for IoT. Okay, who can apply? First of all, the program allows leads and co-leads. There may be up to 4 co-leads, but I will make the comment that after having funded 2 full rounds, it is cumbersome, right, for projects that have more than 1 co-lead. And often the case, what we find at this point in time is that sometimes you list as a co-lead could really be a collaborator, and there's a substantial difference between co-leads and collaborators. Co-leads must file their own claim. The lead is the aggregator of the claim, but the details on the claim are required from the co-lead. So there is significant operational requirements on every co-lead. As well, if there are multiple co-leads on projects, there are significant operational considerations for the FABrIC finance team. As a SME, you must be incorporated or registered in Canada. So that's that clause around multinationals. And you must have significant operations in Canada. So you can't just be a company with 1 employee in Canada and everybody else works internationally. There must be a significant footprint for the company in the country. For the leads and co-leads, one of them at least needs to be a for-profit small and medium enterprise with 500 or less employees. What that means is a university can be the lead applicant as long as there is either a commercialization strategy for the university or they're partnering with a for-profit organization. And not-for-profit organizations, typically universities, are allowed to apply, as well as I said, post-secondary research or their research institutes. So sometimes the university is not the direct applicant. It's a research institute that's affiliated with the university. As well, separate Indigenous organizations are encouraged to apply. I will highlight that in order to apply for a FABrIC grant, you must be a member, right, of FABrIC. And both on the CMC website and on the FABrIC website, there is information on how to become a FABrIC member. It doesn't cost anything, but you must be a member in order to qualify for a grant. Right, and if you're not sure, then email challenges@fabricinnovation.ca and we can tell you if you're in the database. As I said, at least one of the leads or co-leads must be a Canadian small employee. You must have 3 or greater full-time employees at the time of the application. Right, only organization or companies can apply, right, not individuals. And you must comply with Canadian sanctions and trade regulations in this sector. And projects designated under federal environmental impact assessment legislations are not eligible for this program. So if you fall in that category, right, maybe another program, but not this one. Okay, what do we mean lead, co-lead, and collaborator? The lead is the organization leading the project proposal. They are seeking direct funding from FABrIC, are the main point of contact, and they are signatory to the FABrIC project agreement, what is called the ultimate recipient agreement. And they own overall responsibility for reporting and management of the project, assuming the application is successful. The co-lead is also seeking direct funding from FABrIC, is also a signatory to the project agreement or the ultimate recipient agreement, right? And up to 3 co-leads, not 4, as I said earlier. So they can be a combination of 4 leads and co-leads on a project. Again, it's not highly encouraged. It makes the claims process extremely complex. I'll also comment here that if there's a lead and a co-lead, the claims are submitted separately. The lead includes the summary amount from the co-lead or all co-leads on their application. And the funding for the co-leads or the reimbursement dollars for the co-lead flow through the lead. Right? So we are not funding the co-leads directly. They are being funded via the lead in the program. So the lead has to have the capacity to handle the accounting and other issues that would come with paying the co-lead. Collaborators are not a signatory to the project agreement. They are not seeking direct funding from FABrIC, although they may be subcontractors. They may be included in a project work plan, and if they are significant collaborators, right, at least by the full application stage, we're looking for things like letters of support, high awareness on the collaborator side that they're included in the project. It has been the case where leads have listed collaborators and the collaborators know nothing about the application. Right. So if you're listing a collaborator, make sure that they are at least aware, and preferably there is a letter of intent that is signed. Usually a collaborator is an essential partner for the success of the project and a key stakeholder in the success of the project. Again, supply partners, subcontractors, academic, venture capitalists, lead customers, etc., can all be collaborators. Again, a letter of support is highly encouraged for collaborators. And I'll emphasize one more time that one of the lead or the co-leads must be a Canadian small and medium enterprise. Okay. Challenge support. So challenge support is a program that's funded by FABrIC that runs adjacent to the grant program. So these services are delivered by CMC, right, but funded, or a portion of them are funded by the FABrIC program, and they are on top of your grant dollars. Right. So this is a way to make the project more robust. What's included in challenge support, and there's a more comprehensive document on this on the FABrIC website, is the development or support of the development of PDKs, access to CMC's fabrication and packaging support services, right, access to MPWs or custom wafer runs for affordable prototyping, supporting access to the fabrication and leading fabs in Canada and globally. CMC maintains a network of relationships with those fabs. CMC services may also include final design rule checks, chip finishing, and then managing the MPW logistics and/or the interface with the fabs. Cost and reimbursement of this program is recipients pay only for direct materials, right? Typically wafers and chips, and shipping and brokerage. The project costs, the expertise, the labor dollars are funded by FABrIC via the Challenge Support Program. Right, and as I said, they're capped by a ratio of the based on the funding for the project. Right, outside of challenge support, there are, as long as you're within the challenge support envelope of services, there are no additional fees for CMC, right, or via FABrIC. It is possible that you're outside of the challenge support window or guidelines, and you're looking for some service from CMC that is in their commercial business. In that case, CMC can be a subcontractor, but first you'd want to get educated on what's included in the challenge support program and whether or not that activity qualifies for challenge support. And again, challenge support costs are reimbursed separate from your grant program. Okay, how do we pick and what's the process for selecting, or what's the timeline for selecting? As I mentioned, there are 2 rounds going on simultaneously here, and that's either driven by the final deadline for the project or when you want to be assessed, and those 2 things are related. Right, we've already opened the challenge call on August the 10th. Those EOIs are due by September the 8th at 9 o'clock Eastern Time for the round 3 assessment cycle. It is possible that your EOI, even though you've submitted for round 3, right, doesn't really meet the bar to go to full application. That doesn't mean you can't reapply for and tune your EOI and put it in the round 4 cycle. We will notify you by September the 14th about whether or not you're invited to full proposal. And so that's section 3, EOI screening. And I'll just say a few words about what EOI screening means. So when we screen, we are looking for completeness, right? Is the EOI application complete and robust? Can we get enough information out of it that we can understand that it should proceed to full proposal? Right? Is it aligned to FABrIC objectives, and does the applicant meet all the application criteria? Like, are they a SME? Do they have 3 or more employees? Assuming all that happens, right, and typically the failure rate on EOIs is relatively small. Then you get invited to full proposal. In this program, in round 3, the application deadline for full proposals is October the 27th. And you will be notified by the middle of December whether or not, or what the result is, and whether or not your application has been funded. And again, the end date for round 3 project must be by October 31st, 2028. And that's a lot of information. The process is the same for round 4 as for round 3. It's just the dates that change. And I'll emphasize one more time that you can apply whenever you want. If you miss the EOI deadline of September the 8th, then you're automatically in round 4. If your EOI doesn't pass and you're not invited to full proposal, then you can still move to round 4 with some feedback on your EOI from myself and or my colleague. And the one thing I didn't put on there is challenge support services, right, are in an advisory capacity. So if you're looking for technical advice, then challenge support services are available pre-application as well. And you handle those by either asking myself or Tim Warland, who are the solutions advisors, directly, or by emailing challenges@fabricinnovation.ca. Round 4, same process. EOIs in this case are due December the 1st. We'll let you know whether you proceed to full application by December 11th. And you have until February 9th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to submit your full proposal. Right? And you will know by mid-March of 2027 whether your full application has been approved for funding. And those projects must end by December 18th, 2028. Right? So this is what's different between our previous round, where there was one round and it was discrete, right? Had a beginning and an end date. This is applications or EOIs are accepted all the time up until the round 4 EOI submission date, so by December the 1st, right? And or when the end of the project is. Right? The other difference is in round 2, we split fabrication or process development from IoT. Process development and ran them separately. Now they are reintegrated into one challenge call. Financial and timeline. Your estimated eligible expenses or the project cost must be a minimum of $675,000 Canadian, right, up to a maximum of $4 million Canadian, right? That number tweaks if you ask a little bit more for over 1 million in funding. The duration of the project needs to be somewhere between 12 and 24 months, and your application must demonstrate the need for FABrIC funding. And there is a specific question in the full application, in both the EOI and the full application to that regard. You have to demonstrate and put in your application that the team has the resources and skills to execute on the project, and there are specific questions in the application for that. The contract, if you're awarded on a grant, you have 60 days to complete the contract. And projects must be a distinct and incremental investment, right? So you need to demonstrate that this is over and above money. If you already have the money, why are you asking for FABrIC funding? And your application must demonstrate benefits to Canada. And generally those are in 4 criteria: development and retention of HQP, as far as training, job creation, and job retention, the development of IP for commercialization within Canada and then sales internationally, social, environmental, and economic impacts, and you must demonstrate an advancement to the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right? All of this benefits to Canada and outcomes of the project is driven to a section of the application that is the KPIs. So how we are measuring the outcomes. Yes, you are putting objectives and outcomes in language in your application, but there are distinct KPI measures that you are required to answer in the application. Projects are broadly assessed against 3 categories or sections. The commercial opportunities and outcomes section. So there are a number of questions in that section of the application, right? Advancement of the FABrIC ecosystem and overall benefits to Canada. So there are a number of questions in that section of the application, right? And project execution, budget, and likelihood of success. So that's for stuff like, who are the team members? What's the organizational and project track record of the organization? And those are questions in a separate section of the application. All 3 of those categories are weighted equally, right? The assessment is done by either the FABrIC or the initial assessment is done by independent evaluators and eventually makes its way up through an assessment process to the FABrIC Advisory Committee. The FABrIC team itself and CMC employees are not part of the assessment process. All that the FABrIC team does is review your EOI and your full application for completeness. Right? We're not making a value judgment of either your EOI or your full application. That is done always by third parties. Some of those third parties are totally independent of CMC or FABrIC. Some are members of the FABrIC Advisory Committee. Proposals that are evaluated to be excessively weak in their demonstration of any of the success criteria may not be successful. So you can't just pass 2 out of 3. You have to be robust in your application against all 3 selection criteria. Execution requirements. If your application is funded, you get an award letter date, you get an award letter. Funding or expenses can accrue as of the award letter date, assuming the payment is made after the award letter date. Once the award letter is given to you, you have 60 days to complete the ultimate recipient agreement. Right? And so the ultimate recipient agreement has the legal terms and conditions of your relationship with CMC via the FABrIC program, and that ultimate recipient agreement has been reviewed and approved by ISED. Again, eligible expenses can be claimed as of the award date, and eligible expenses are reimbursement for dollars paid out with proof of payment, not for expenses incurred and accrued, right, on your P&L. All work up to 10% of the work can occur outside of Canada with approval, which means that shows up in your application and we don't have any issues with it. But otherwise, all work must be performed in Canada unless otherwise pre-approved, and then you're still limited to 10%. There was a document guide called the Eligible Project Expenses Guide, which is available on the FABrIC website, right? And you must comply with the Eligible Project Expenses Guide, and it is pretty detailed about what qualifies and what doesn't. And then there's stacking limits, right? So first of all, stacking is allowed in this program, right? And you can stack for up to 75% of eligible supported costs, unless you're a post-secondary institution where you can stack up to 100%. Right, so that means, remember I said that if you're an IoT project, you're funded up to 37%, and if you're a Fab project, you're funded up to 40%. The rest of the money needs to come from somewhere, and that includes other government grant, provincial or federal, and things like SHRED and IRAP. So they can show up in where that other money is coming from. It doesn't all need to be private sector or self-funding or revenue-based funding, right? And in fact, we're probably looking for SHRED. Because it's such a robust program. Execution requirements, right? The ownership of all foreground IP, so IP that is created through the funding of the project, must be used for the benefit of Canada for a minimum of 5 years after the completion of the project. That means you are bound by terms and conditions in the project to make sure that that IP benefits the country and all the things that you said were the benefit to Canada and the FABrIC ecosystem for up to 5 years. It doesn't mean you can't sell your company. You can sell your company, but the government maintains the right to come back and ask for the grant dollars back, since they're not getting the benefit of 5 years. And you must provide evidence of the access to background IP that shows up in a schedule in the ultimate recipient agreement where you are listing your background IP. Reporting and claims comes in kind of 3 buckets. There is quarterly reporting on activities, or basically on the progress of your statement of work and milestones. Also on a quarterly basis, there is submission of your financial claim and your supporting document. Those dates are defined dates annually. They are not defined by when the start date of the project is. For example, the next claim date for all projects that are out there, including the ones that were awarded as of the end of June that are still in contract negotiations. The first claim date is September, the next claim date is September the 15th, and then every 3 months thereafter. And again, with the financial claim, you must be able to provide supporting documents. So if you are claiming direct labor, you need to have a payroll tracking system, and you need to be able to provide evidence of what the payroll submission was. If you're claiming direct materials, you need to have the proof of payment for things like direct materials. And the comment on additional reporting may be required really refers to a couple of items right now. There's like a very short ad hoc monthly report that is used by the FABrIC team just to keep a quick status on your project. Typically, meetings are bi-weekly after the contracting period is done. So it's just kind of a short 10-minute, give us some view about how your project is proceeding. And that's so we can keep a pulse on projects that are falling behind or are under budget. The other report that's required happens twice a year, September 15th and March 15th, or March 15th and September 15th, and that's the KPI report. So in a schedule, in an attachment to your ultimate recipient agreement, you are committing to KPIs, right? So twice a year, we're asking for an update on your progress of those KPIs. The reporting on the SOW, or your statement of work and milestones, on the monthly report and the KPI reporting are all done online. The claim and its supporting document, that process is offline. There's a secondary piece to the financial claim document where we're asking you for a budget and your progress against that budget. So budget, actuals, and forecast. right? And that helps us keep track of how the dollars are being consumed across the projects. Because the worst thing in a government program is to be underspent by the end of the project. Again, on compliance, you must comply with all Canadian economic and trade sanctions, which in this sector can be significant. Okay, the last two slides were pretty heavy, so again, I'll wait a few seconds to make sure you have time to enter any questions. Can everybody hear me? Like, am I clear and crisp? Any issues with that? Yeah, getting a couple of thumbs
reported.
Getting a couple of thumbs up, loud and clear. Can you hear clearly? Thank you. Okay, how do you apply? Right, you download. Application is online, but we make a version of the EOI available via the Fabric website, right? And you can download that EOI offline application today. It's a Word document. You're highly encouraged to complete the Word document and then cut and paste into the online application. It's a lot easier than filling out the application directly online. In order, as I said, that's online. That's via a product called Blackbaud. So you must create an account on Blackbaud. There are instructions on how to do that on the FABrIC Challenges portal. Again, you must be a FABrIC member, right? So you must either have or apply to be a FABrIC member, and that usually takes between 2 to 5 days, right, in order to submit your application. And your final EOI is submitted through the portal. So you complete the form, you can stop and start, but once you hit the submit button, then you're done. If you have questions before, during, or even after the EOI process, then please email challenges@fabricinnovation.ca. Right, and there is both a challenges guide and other detail, and like the expenses guide, that are available on the challenges pages. What this slide doesn't say is how do you get the full application. But remember, I said you should get an invitation to the full application by about September the 14th, give or take. Those documents are emailed to you. They are not available publicly on the website. Okay, FABrIC membership, a little bit is free membership for Canadian industry, not-for-profit, and government agencies. Right, what does it give you? You can participate in challenge calls. There's a separate program called the Quantum Sandbox that makes you eligible if you want that program. You need FABrIC membership for that. I mentioned something called the Innovation Platform that has two major components that are a requirement of a challenge call. The key requirement is the IP registry. So that's just a list of the IP that is created with the funding of the challenge grants. Right. So you are required, and there's contractual language that says you must put information in the registry. You can choose to put information in the repository. Right. So if you have a PDK coming out of the FABrIC process development challenge, and you want that PDK to be broadly available because the more it's used, the lower your cost of production is, then you can put that PDK in there. You can put information in the repository about what your IP is, right, but not the IP itself. So if you're trying to license your IP, right, then it's in the registry, but you can put some more information in the repository. The other part of the innovation platform is there is training and reskilling. Sometimes that's free, sometimes it's at a cost, right? So that's also a component of the innovation platform. Both FABrIC and CMC also hold a number of events through the year. The next major event for FABrIC is our Canadian Semiconductor Symposium, which is October 19th to 21st in Ottawa, right? And you also get member pricing on quantum services. So there are some discounts available to FABrIC members. And as well, we hold networking, both live and virtual networking events all the time. You are invited to those. You're invited to share and collaborate on social media. right, and communicate with the CMC and FABrIC teams, right? And a lot of, I need an introduction to this person, or do you know somebody who does this? That happens on a daily basis. Okay, and this is the CMC FABrIC side. These are our founding members, and I'll point out that there are a lot of other organizations that are affiliated with either FABrIC or CMC that are either providing some service, right, have some other degree of support, or just you might want an introduction to. Okay, with that, I will stop. I thank you for your attendance. I encourage you to apply.